Good morning. Today's video, we're going to cover some basics of estate planning. So the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of estate planning seminars and webinars packed to the brim, great turnout. So I figured, obviously, if people are showing up, it's a topic that is on front of people's mind, right? So let's just kind of dive into some basics, and then we'll expand on it in future videos. So common misconception about estate planning is it's only for the very wealthy. Estate tax limits have gone up dramatically over the last few years. Next year, it's going to be 15 million per person, 30 million per couple. So a lot of people think, well, I don't really need estate planning, or I don't need a trust. And that's not the case. Estate planning is for everyone, and it doesn't really matter what age you are. I want to make sure there's not a mess for my two kids. I want to make sure there's not a mess for my wife. I want clear instructions. So estate planning is making sure you do not leave behind a bundle of chaos financially or document-wise for those you care about, right? So it's one of the kindest things you can do for your loved ones. Now, that doesn't change the grieving process, right? It's still going to be really tough when your family loses someone, but for anyone that's been through it, grieving is even tougher when you've got a ton of stress and chaos financially to pick up the pieces from. So the key part of this is, how do you set up your estate in a way where it's less likely to create a mess? So let's start with some basics and just kind of go over the definition. So let's start with an estate. What is the estate? So estate, and this doesn't mean that it's taxable, but the estate is the term for everything that you've ever accumulated, right? It's your house. It's the stuff in the house. It's the old fridge in the garage, the couch from 1970, and all the change that's accumulated in that couch. It's art, it's jewelry, it's cars, it's all of your financial accounts, your retirement accounts, life insurance, business insurance. So everything you own is part of the estate. That doesn't mean it's taxable, but it's part of the estate. Now, probate is the process to distribute your estate if you have not done planning. So probate is where the will is read. So if you have a will, the will is read in probate. So question I always ask, I have a will, right? That, helps me avoid probate. No, another misconception. The will is read in probate. So if you have not done other planning, having a will means you will go through probate. Now, there's some advantages to probate, right? So probate goes in front of a judge. If you've got a family or a situation where you want a judge's involvement, great, go through probate. But a few things to be aware of with probate. So one, it's something that goes through the court. So you may have to hire an attorney. There may be some very expensive cost for hiring that attorney, right? So there's a financial cost to probate. It's public record. So anything that goes through probate, the solicitors and scammers, creditors, long lost family members all can come out of the woodwork because it's public record. And it can be time consuming. I've worked with clients that have had nightmare probate scenarios that have taken years to get all sorted out. So timely, expensive, and public. Now, again, that doesn't mean that probate is a bad thing, but just something to be aware of. Some people may want more privacy. They want a quicker process for their loved ones, and they want to reduce costs. So how do we do that? So the first is to be aware of what goes through probate. So what goes through probate is essentially everything that is not jointly owned. So, think about the deed if there's two names on it. Think about, the home deed. Think about if you have a joint bank account or a joint investment account. So anything that's jointly titled will not go through probate. Anything that has a beneficiary on it will not go through probate. Now, this is also a pitfall that I regularly see. So the beneficiaries on an account trump what's in the will. So I regularly see people that have said, hey, I'm going back to the attorney 2-3 times to update the will, but then they have an old 401k or an employer plan from 30 years ago that has an ex-spouse on it, or they didn't have kids, and their parents are on it, and the parents are no longer living. So it's critical, if you have accounts with beneficiaries, to update those beneficiaries, check to make sure they're still aligned with your wishes. But if there is a beneficiary on that account, that takes precedent over the will. So anything with a beneficiary on it will avoid probate. Anything that goes by valid trust will avoid probate. So a question becomes, hey, do we need a trust or do we need a will? So the advantage of the will is it's going to spell out exactly what happens to your stuff, but there's two things to be aware of. One, it only takes effect when you die, and I'll explain in a moment why that's important. Two, it is a point of time transaction. It's going to distribute at probate, right? So let's unpack that a little bit. So the first is it only takes place at death. So I worked in Sarasota for years. I worked with people as old as 110. I saw a lot of death, but I also saw a lot of incapacitation, whether that was dementia, that was strokes, that was just really old age, and they didn't have the cognition or desire to take care of their finances. So a will is not going to give instructions if you are unable to take care of your finances while you're living. If you become incapacitated, the will doesn't provide a contingency plan. So a trust will spell out what happens if you're incapacitated. So it does planning while you're living for finances. The second is a trust can allow you to spread out your estate over a period of time. So you may have grandkids or kids that you don't want it to get all at once. Well, a will give it all at once. So there's a couple things to be aware of with that. So one, you may have someone on disability and getting an outright lump sum impacts their eligibility for aid. You may have someone that if they get a ton of money, they have a bunch of creditors or they're in a lawsuit or a divorce, and now all of a sudden that money is at risk, right? So a trust can protect that for the heirs, right? You can put terms on it where they get it over a period of time to protect aid, to protect against creditors, lawsuits, divorces. You also have the ability to make sure that your wishes are adhered to. So you may want the money to be used for certain things, not go get a new Ferrari. Well, a will doesn't specify that. The trust can put terms on it. So the benefit of the trust is it protects against incapacitation and it provides instructions and timeline for your heirs, but it also provides a level of protection that the will just won't provide. Now, again, that doesn't mean you need a trust, but things to be aware of is it avoids probate. It's private. It's typically less costly than hiring an attorney for probate. It's going to be a much quicker distribution, and it provides protections that a will just can't provide. So the next thing that we want to be aware of is power of attorney. So I regularly see people get power of attorney. So durable power of attorney gives someone the ability to act on your behalf financially if you become incapacitated, right? So that's different than traveling to Europe and giving someone power of attorney to sign for UPS when they arrive, right? So this is someone you really trust because you're not mentally able to check them, right? So you need to have someone that you really trust. Now, another pitfall with this is I have seen power of attorneys be done 20 years before they're needed, and now all of a sudden financial institutions are saying, hey, go get a new one. These are really outdated. So I think what's key is there is something called a financial power of attorney form with most financial institutions. So when you get a power of attorney document done, general best practice is to also get that on file with your financial institutions. That way, when you need it, you're not waiting for their processing team to review it or potentially reject it. It's just already on file. So these are a couple of basics. We'll get into more of the strategy side of things here in future videos, but hopefully this is helpful. If you find this content helpful, please subscribe. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day.